हाँ जी, तो आइए पढ़ें आर्टिकल colorblind in London। ये किस बारे में थोड़ा बता दें भाई। वो कुछ सुनक सुनक करके जो है तुनक तुनक तारारा, वो काफ़ी अच्छे चल रहे हैं इन द रेस ऑफ प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफ यूके। और पिछली बार भी ऐसा कुछ रहे हैं कंटेंडर्स अच्छे, और इस बार भी बात ले दे करके ये है कि भाई इस कंट्री के अंदर चाहे मतलब माइनॉरिटी एथनिसिटी के लोग हों, चाहे माइनॉरिटी रिलीजन के हों, चाहे माइनॉरिटी कलर के हों, इट इज़ नॉट अ बिग डील देयर कि वो प्राइम मिनिस्टर बनने जा रहा है। इट शोज़ देयर रिवोल्यूशन ओवर टाइम। सबसे पहले शुरू हुए थे वो इवॉल्व करने, द ब्रिटिश पीपल। I think more than 50% of Janta there is atheist, as per my own view. Not because of its original form, but as it has been interpreted. Religion is the biggest virus today. उनकी 50% जनता से ऊपर वैक्सीनेटेड है भैया। उनको नहीं फ़र्क पड़ता रिलीजन, मतलब पढ़ता होगा, स्पिरिचुअलिज्म से पढ़ता होगा, अपने अंदर का पढ़ता होगा, कॉन्शियंस का पढ़ता होगा। ये नहीं कि झंडे लेकर के सड़कों पे नहीं आते वो, ओला ऊबर जय श्री राम नहीं करते वो। As the race to succeed Boris Johnson as the leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister of the UK starts to take shape, one extraordinary fact has emerged. More than half the contenders in the initial stages are from immigrant, non-white, ethnic minority backgrounds, including one, Nadeem Zahawi, who was not even born in the UK but came to the country as a 9-year-old fleeing persecution in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. My God. Rishi Tunak, whose parents immigrated from East Africa and are of Indian origin, and who is married to the daughter of Narayana Murthy of Infosys fame, is an early frontrunner and has received the backing of several heavyweight Tory MPs. If he or any of the other ethnic minority candidates wins the Conservative Party's mandate in early September, we could witness the astonishing spectacle of a non Anglo Saxon child of the colonies becoming the most powerful person in the UK, just over 7 decades after the British Empire started its messy retreat from the Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. The fact that next British PM may be brown or black is by itself perhaps not that remarkable. The last 2 decades have seen Barack Obama, whose father is Kenyan, being elected as the first black president of the United States. Kamala Harris, born to an Indian mother and Jamaican father, was appointed the first black and woman vice president of the US. And Leo Varadkar, whose father is Indian, became prime minister of the island. The UK itself has had several senior members of the government who are not white, going back to the days of Paul Bothang and Shriti Vadera, when the Labour Party was last in power under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown in the 2000s. मतलब कोई नई बात नहीं चल रही है. And beyond politics, the UK has seen several black and brown people gain prominence in sports, media, arts, medicine, and to a lesser extent in business. Hinduja brothers, सबसे बड़ी कोठी उन्हीं की है लंदन में. Nasser Hussain, born to a Tamil Muslim father in Chennai, captained the English cricket team as far back as 1999. What is truly remarkable about the ongoing Tory party leadership contest, however, is how little comment there has been on the skin color of the slate. The British political classes, media, and public at large seem intensely unconcerned about the next occupant of 10 Downing Street being non white. In a country that is inextricably linked in many Indian minds with an ugly history of racism, this is nothing short of astounding. What is even more surprising is that there is virtually no discussion of the fact that the runners and riders left include a Hindu, a practicing Buddhist with Hindu Catholic roots, and incredibly for a Tory party which has in the past revealed a nasty seam of Islamophobia, a Muslim. The contrast with the sham controversy in the US over Barack Obama's allegedly secret Muslim faith could not be starker. हाँ मतलब यार ये बढ़िया है, मतलब खिचड़ी है जो है सब मिक्स करके, द आइडियल सिचुएशन. क्योंकि हाँ, बराक ओबामा को तो हमको भी पता है, काला बन गया, देखो काला बन गया, वो मुस्लिम भी है और ये सब. Even the whiff of the possibility that the hidebound conservatives might embrace as the next head of the UK government a complete non native in terms of skin color, ethnicity, but also importantly religion is a truly stunning development for a country molded by its Protestant religion, Anglo Saxon ethnicity, imperial past, and bitter history of racial tension. Even if in the end of a white English candidate is elected PM, the sheer make-up of the Tory leadership race reflects a further maturing of the British public's views on race, religion, and even nationality, just like the appointment 9 years ago with little fuss of a complete foreigner, the Canadian Mark Carney, as the governor of the Bank of England. Imagine if the next RBI governor is from Malaysia or Mauritius. Oh my God. हमारे तो यहाँ भी एक खाली टाटा मोटर्स या आई डोंट नो व्हाट एक प्राइवेट कंसर्न उसका चीफ बना दिया जा रहा था सम चीफ which was an Iranian guy I think. उस बारे में जो फरोर उठा है दिस इंक्रीजिंगली यार ये मेच्योरिटी ज़रूरी है पब्लिक ओपिनियन तो चलो बात की बात है पहले पब्लिक में मेच्योरिटी आना ज़रूरी है हमारी बहुत बड़ी पब्लिक है यार वैसे. This increasingly relaxed attitude towards identity, I would argue, has emerged as a key source of the UK's soft power. The small island punches well above its economic and military weight in terms of global influence in a way that, say, Japan or Germany or Italy do not. हाँ भाई इतू सा है लेकिन चलो पास में किया सो किया आजकल तो मोस्टली इक्वली लैटरल वर्ल्ड है तब भी है काफ़ी इन्फ्लुएंस. British universities attract the brightest from around the world. जब हैं यार ये लोग हैं यार मतलब intellectual capital of the world. The British media and the British culture at large exert disproportionate appeal while Brits are legion in the corridors of multinational companies and global institutions. While colonial history and the worldwide spread of English are powerful foundations, it is the successful redefinition over the past 2 decades of British identity as inclusive and multicultural. By contrast, for instance, to another former colonial power such as France. सब फ्रांस को मुस्लिम से प्रॉब्लम है अमेरिका में एथनिक दंगा है हम तो खैर हैं ही महान चाइनीज़ अपने अलग साइड में उनका पता नहीं क्या सीन है क्या बड़ी पावर जो है ना जर्मनी में भी थोड़ा थोड़ा कभी कभी ऐसे नाजी हैंगओवर आ जाता है राइटिस्ट जो लोग हैं ना पास्ट को यूज़ करके कभी ना कभी बकवास कर ही लेते हैं. That provides the continued impetus to Britain's global sway. Even the success of English as a language relative to French, for instance, has been attributed to its mongrel like ability to absorb and transform words and usage from other languages. Correct. There is a lesson for India. Since independence, India's strategic posture has relied on soft power to make up for its relative lack of economic and military power. We exerted disproportionate moral authority on the global stage by dint of the world's appreciation of our millennia old culture and traditions, the impact of Gandhi, and the uniquely non-violent nature of our independence movement, and our policy of non alignment and non interference in the affairs of the other countries. A key dimension of India's influence was that it was seen as a society that, while fractious and riven by hierarchy and inequality, was also open and accommodating of multiple faiths and traditions and largely peaceable in orientation. This last dimension has badly eroded over the past decade as the world sees us becoming increasingly chauvinistic and asserting an aggressive and intolerant Hindu identity and pressuring our minorities. बात आई गई सही बात है यार ये इतने लोग बोल रहे हैं तो बिल्कुल भी बेसलेस झूठ तो नहीं है ये सही बात है कि आप ये जो माहौल बना रहे हो सी वर्ल्ड इज़ वॉचिंग ओवर यू और ऐसे देश हम जैसे जिनके पास में सच में मिलिट्री और इकनॉमी इतनी बड़ी बात नहीं है तो उनके लिए ये सॉफ्ट डिप्लोमेसी का लिए ये बुद्धिस्ट होना और ये कल्चरल यूनिटी इन डाइवर्सिटी नाम की चीज़, सभी तो यूपीएससी पूछता है बार बार. It is our, the only thing that is going to help us attain our, preferred position in the world dynamics. और हम उसी को मतलब अच्छे से नहीं रख रहे हैं यार. While this has been portrayed as payback for historical wrongs and a revival of Hindu India's strength by the right wing, the world sees it more as the ugly preening of the schoolyard bully, beating up the weak, greed Muslims, Christians, at home to cover up insecurities and weakness when faced with the real world outside. सही गल है. सही गल है ये. मतलब ये नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, अगर सिचुएशंस, इकोनॉमिक सिचुएशंस को काउंटर नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स में नहीं ढंग से वो कर पा रहे हैं, तो पहले जिंग जिंग चिंग चिंग पिंग पिंग भी ये काम करे हैं उसने भी, और हमने भी करे हैं कहीं ना कहीं. वी कैन नॉट डिनाई द फैक्ट दैट वी टू मेंटेन डोमेस्टिक लेजिटिमेसी ये हरकतें करते हैं अथॉरिटेरियन गवर्नमेंट्स ऐसी कि आपस में लड़ा दो और कल्चरल नेशनलिज्म, पास्ट को रिवाइव करना. The knock that India's soft power is taking as a result is all the more serious in the context of the growing threat from China. India's global moral and cultural influence is perhaps the only dimension of power where we vastly outperform our northern neighbor. This is not just about Bollywood and cricket. The number of foreign born CEOs of leading Western companies who are of Indian origin is next only to Brits, and the same is likely true of academics in the top American and European universities. But even as Britain is gradually embracing a multifaceted identity to its global advantage, India is moving in the opposite direction, away from its heritage of inclusiveness towards a narrow religious cultural nationalism that even excludes fellow Indians whose forefathers gravitated towards other faiths many centuries ago. और देखो ये आर्टिकल लिख रहा है अ प्राइवेट इक्विटी इन्वेस्टर बेस्ड इन लंदन. समझ रहे हैं आप? इन्वेस्टर सेंटीमेंट नाम की कोई चीज़ होती है. विवेक देबरॉय साहब की फ़ोटो लगी हुई है इसीलिए चालू कर रहा हूँ पढ़ना. अच्छा नहीं लगा तो बीच में ही छोड़ दूँगा. There was an exhibition in town called Tantra on Edge. It has now moved elsewhere from Delhi to Mumbai and will move abroad thereafter. Ajit Mukherjee wrote a lot on Tantra, and those interested in the subject will have read his book, Tantra Art. There is a later book on Yoga Art too. A lot has been written on Tantra, not always very well informed. Tantra is not easy to pin down, and there is a Tantra tradition outside India too. The philosophy and practice naturally influence traditional art, motifs, and symbols. The Bindu, triangle, लिंगम, यंत्र, मंडला, चक्र, बीजा. जल्दी से जाके चेक करो मंडला पेंटिंग्स कहाँ की हैं, कैसी दिखती हैं. जीआई टैगिंग है शायद. Every Indian will have encountered these images in one form or the other, even if we don't always notice them explicitly or understand their deep mystic symbolism. For instance, Indians were and are still fascinated by the Beatles, and the Beatles were fond of cars. Correct. George Harrison possessed expensive and fancy cars, but he also had a Mini Cooper, and most Beatles fans will be familiar with its psychedelic art. It is featured in Magical Mystery Tour. Subsequently, it was repainted. भाई मैं भी हूँ तो बीटल्स का थोड़ा बहुत था फ़ैन, लेकिन अभी ये कौन से की बात कर रहे हो मैंने वो देखा नहीं एग्जैक्टली क्या बात कर रहे हैं, देखूंगा मैं वापस. The original car seems to have vanished, but one can still form some idea of what it must have looked like from collectible miniatures. Plus, there are images and films. When Harrison originally purchased the car, it was metallic black. Black. The subsequent repainting was on the basis of images from Mukherjee's book. Inevitably, the car will be described as being painted in psychedelic colors, and even Indians will not always appreciate the Tantra symbolism. Etymologically, the use of the word psychedelic isn't wrong, but the word is often associated with drugs and reminds us of the swinging 60s, the Vietnam War, hippie culture, Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, transcendental meditation, Ravi Shankar, Allen Ginsberg, and Woodstock. Interesting. You should read it. The West was attracted to the world of Tantra and our perceptions about Tantra are often shaped by what the West thought and continues to think about it. Therefore, a documentary film must show Kali smoking a cigarette. Hmm. As Ajit Mukherjee's book documented, Tantra has always featured in traditional art. But following its discovery in the West, Indian artists, modern ones, started to incorporate Tantra into art forms. It was almost a new movement in modern Indian art. The exhibition I mentioned is a documentation of the work of 16 prominent Indian artists. Some incorporated elements of Tantra, others were exclusively driven by Tantra. Some experimented using creative license. A few famous artists are not identified with Tantra. Nonetheless, the art painting has been influenced by Tantra. If you have missed the exhibition, there is an accompanying book curated by Madhu Khanna. There is a broader task of documenting our legacy, including the legacy of Tantra influencing art. Most of this is traditional. What I have mentioned is only the documentation of the work of 16 modern Indian artists. The larger task of documentation remains. There are books galore on Tantra, popular and academic. Most, though not all, of the academic work has emanated from outside India and is also a function of whether one is writing of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, or something else. Within Hinduism, there are Vaishnava, Shaiva, and Shakti strands. Within the Shaiva and Shakti strands, there are texts and practices from Kashmir and texts and practices from Bengal and Bihar. The word Tantra is itself capable of multiple meanings. Perhaps the most acceptable definition will be that of the warp and weft that exists within the universe and within every living being. ध्यान दीजिए शब्दों पे. Relatively speaking, why is there limited research that emanates from within India? The answer has many layers, but partly it has to do with another word, kaola. अब यार ये भी सॉफ्ट डिप्लोमेसी का पार्ट हो सकता है कल को, तो ऐसे इसको अवॉइड करके थोड़ी जा सकते हैं. ऐसी तो आती है न्यूज़पेपर में से उठ करके चीज़ें, 5 साल पहले पता नहीं किसी ने कुछ छोटा मोटा लिख दिया, आ गया यूपीएससी में पे क्वेश्चन. पढ़ लो ना, क्या जा रहा है. दिस वर्ड हैज़ मल्टीपल मीनिंग्स टू काओला. However, fundamentally, this word underlines a tradition of knowledge about practices being passed down through a family and a lineage, not meant for dissemination to outsiders. Okay. This proposition about parampara is true of many of our knowledge systems, but it is especially true of Tantra. I take Diksha into the system and use Tantra in my everyday practice. The objective is not to do research and publish academic papers in books about Tantra. That's the reason practitioners rarely speak or write about Tantra, and texts seem to be mysterious and esoteric. Practices are not meant to be obvious and open to everyone. This has a flip side. There are several books on Tantra, based best described as Tantra for Dummies. They simplify and often give Tantra a bad time, especially when one has the left handed path, Vamachar, in mind. There are practitioners who give Tantra a bad name too, proclaiming to the gullible that they can use their powers of Tantra to malign and benign effect, the former naturally directed against adversaries. बीरभूम डिस्ट्रिक्ट इन वेस्ट बंगाल इज़ नोन फॉर इट्स तंत्रा प्रैक्टिसेस. चलो इतना ही आ जाए कि भाई ये तंत्रा नाम की चीज़ है, ये कहाँ से, विच पार्ट ऑफ द कंट्री से एसोसिएटेड है. तो ये मोस्टली प्रोमिनेंट थी बंगाल में. क्या है इसका देख लेना. बंगाल इज़ नोन एज फॉर इट्स तंत्रा प्रैक्टिसेस. कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है, किसी का सर फिर जाए यूपीएससी में इस पेपर में डाल दे तंत्रा के बारे में बताएं. पिछली बार भी तो आया था एक बार ऐसा अजीब सा न्यूमिस्मैटिक्स. Whatever thing is in the vogue, and being avoided by people, वो उठा लेते हैं. Recently, I met an engineer who has turned into a sannyasi and tantric. It was eerie, chatting with him in the middle of the night near a cremation ground with a fire burning in front. He sought my help on a simple matter. Couldn't something be done to prevent fraudulent practitioners from advertising their powers and on print and electronic media and fleecing the gullible and the poor? अभी आ गई ना इम्पॉर्टेंट बात. कहीं पे छोटा सा मेंशन तो आप इसको कर ही सकते हैं. वशीकरण कर दें, हैं, प्रेम संबंध बना लें, हैं, विदेश यात्रा का योग. अरे तो ये पब्लिक मरती है ना इसमें. As you will appreciate, this isn't a question of the law alone which exists, but its enforcement. Yes, ये इनकी खास बात है यार। ये क्या है कि पूरे आर्टिकल बकवास करते हैं, लास्ट में आकर के छोटी सी अच्छी बात कर देते हैं. So far, I haven't been able to do much. Tantra has always been on the edge, not necessarily part of the mainstream. That's also the reason it is rarely taught in courses on Hindu religion. जो लोग नहीं जानते हैं एक बार फिर से देख लें. द राइटर इज चेयरमैन इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजरी काउंसिल टू द पीएम. वो एचपीवी का एक छोटा सा और देख लेते हैं, बाकी बचा हुआ अगली पार्ट में. द सीरम इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ इंडिया, sorry, what India's first HPV vaccine could mean for fight against cervical cancer. The Serum Institute of India vaccine Cervavac recently received the Drugs Controller General of India's approval for market authorization. DGCI देता है साहब अप्रूवल वैक्सीन्स के लिए. Cervavac is India's first quadrivalent human papilloma virus vaccine and intended to protect women against cervical cancer. Experts see this as a real opportunity to eliminate cervical cancer and have expressed the hope that it will be rolled out in national HPV vaccination strategies and be available at a cost more affordable than existing vaccines. The disease, cervical cancer, is preventable but kills one woman every 8 minutes in the country, said Dr. Smita Joshi, senior scientist with Prayas Help Group, which is a public charitable trust working on sexuality, gender, and HIV/AIDS. It is preventable as long as it is detected early and managed effectively. Cervical cancer is a common sexually transmitted infection. Long lasting infection with certain types of HPV is the main cause of cervical cancer. यार ये सेक्सुअल बिहेवियर भी हमारा ऐसा घटिया है ना, मतलब आई एम श्योर इंडियन मेन आर समवेयर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर दिस. मतलब हाइजीन वाइजीन तो भूल जाए साले जानवर. Worldwide, cervical cancer is the second most common cancer type and the second most common cause of cancer death in women in reproductive ages 15 to 44. India accounts for about a fifth of the global burden with 1.23 lakh cases and around 67,000 deaths per year. My God, according to the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer. स्क्रीनिंग एंड वैक्सीनेशन आर टू पावरफुल टूल्स. और उसके बाद में कोई डिजीज़ की स्क्रीनिंग वगैरह तो हमारे देश में भूल ही जाओ यार. मतलब पहले तो हमारी प्रैक्टिसेस ही इतनी अच्छी हैं फॉर प्रिवेंटिंग सर्वाइकल कैंसर. Still, there is a little awareness among women for prevention of this cancer, and less than 10% of Indian women get screened. All women aged 30 to 49 must get screened for cervical cancer, even if they have no symptoms, and get their adolescent daughters vaccinated with HPV vaccine, Dr. Joshi said. Existing vaccines. Two vaccines licensed globally are available in India: a quadrivalent vaccine, Gardasil from Merck, and a bivalent vaccine, Cervarix from GlaxoSmithKline. Each dose costs rupees 2800 per dose or 3299. Although HPV vaccination was introduced in 2008, it has yet to be included in the National Immunization Program. According to a report in the Indian Journal of Gynecologic Oncology, a vaccine, oncology is about cancer, gynecology is about the reproductive system of women. A vaccine delivery and demonstration project led by international non-profit organization PATH was started in 2009 in Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat, but had to be suspended in 2010 as a result of public concern allegedly arising from the deaths of 7 girls who received the vaccine. My God. In 2016, a multidisciplinary expert group of the Indian Council of Medical Research reviewed available evidence globally regarding immunogenicity and efficacy, adverse effects, and cost effectiveness of HPV vaccines, and recommended that adolescent girls should be vaccinated with 2 doses. The new vaccine. The vaccine is based on VLP, virus like particles, similar to the hepatitis B vaccine, and provides protection by generating antibodies against the HPV virus's L1 protein. Experts have expressed hope that the DGCI approval will allow the government to procure enough HPV vaccines at a special price to vaccinate nearly 50 million girls aged 9 to 14 years in India who are waiting to receive the vaccine. This will be a huge step to accelerate cervical cancer elimination in India and globally, a statement from IARC WHO has said. अभी आपका काम है आसपास आपके जो भी 9 से 14 साल की बच्ची आपको दिखाई देती है उसके पेरेंट्स को सजेस्ट करो कि जाओ सर ये काम कराओ as soon as it मतलब to put light on this thing for them. It will be great to see this vaccine. मतलब देश की सेवा ना आईएएस बनने के बाद ही नहीं करोगे, जब हो रही है जितनी हो रही है तब भी करते रहो थोड़ी थोड़ी. It will be great to see this vaccine being rolled out in the national HPV vaccination strategies in India and globally. We have a real opportunity to eliminate cervical cancer, which causes a lot of death and suffering worldwide among women. WHO Chief Scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan told the Indian Express. SII Serum Institute of India received the DGCI's authorization in the second week of July. SII plans to launch the vaccine by the end of the year, although officials said it was too early to comment on the quantities. In particular, this vaccine is very important for adolescent girls as teenagers and upwards to protect them against cervical cancer, said Adar Poonawala. Trial results. Scientists from IARC were part of a collaboration between the Department of Biotech of the Government of India, US States National Institutes of Health, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to support the evaluation of the vaccine in females and males aged 9 to 26. This model of public-private partnership resulted in completion of phase 2 and phase 3 trials despite the pandemic, IARC WHO said. Clinical trials commenced in early 2019 involving thousands of participants across 12 sites in the country. Phase 3 trials show a robust immune response in 100% of the vaccine recipients with excellent safety records, according to SII officials. Vaccination can be started at the relatively young age of 9. Dr. Sanjay Gupte, former president of Federation of Obstetric and Gynecological Society of India, said that vaccination is extremely effective when administered before the first sexual intercourse. Oh, yeah. Oh my god, wow. So that's why. You see, this is changes the whole thing now. Dr. Gupta agreed that it was difficult to convince women to get screened for cervical cancer, and hence this development is of immense importance. My God, serious area. Let us meet in the next part.